Think about the last time you got into a heated disagreement. Maybe it was with a coworker about a project, a family member over something trivial, or even a stranger online. You laid out your points, defended your position, maybe even raised your voice a little, and in the end, you felt like you came out on top. You won, right? But then, hours later, that feeling of victory starts to fade. Instead of satisfaction, you're left with a lingering sense of emptiness, frustration, or even regret. The other person probably didn't really change their mind. The relationship might feel strained, and you're left wondering what was that all really for. This experience is far more common than we'd like to admit. We've been taught that arguments are battles to be won, that the goal is to prove we're right and the other person is wrong. But what if we've been playing the wrong game entirely? The ancient philosophy of Stoicism offers a radically different perspective, one that has the power to completely reframe how we approach disagreements. At its heart, Stoicism teaches us that true victory isn't about convincing someone else. It's about mastering our own reactions, our judgments, and our inner state. As the Stoic teacher Epictetus put it, some things are within our control while others are not. Our opinions, our desires, our aversions, these are within our control. But other people's thoughts, their reactions, whether they agree with us, those lie entirely outside our control. In this video, we're going to explore how Stoicism transforms the entire concept of argument. We'll dive into principles that are as practical today as they were 2,000 years ago, ideas that can help you find calm in conflict, clarity in chaos, and a deeper sense of integrity regardless of how the conversation ends. This isn't about learning better debate tactics or how to outmaneuver someone verbally. It's about shifting the battlefield from outside to within and discovering that the most meaningful victories are the ones no one else can see. If you've ever walked away from an argument feeling hollow even when you won, this journey into Stoic thought might just change how you engage with disagreement forever. So let's look closer at this idea of winning. What does it actually mean to win an argument? In the moment, it feels like getting the other person to admit they're wrong, to concede the point, to finally see things our way. We get that rush of being right, of having our perspective validated, but the Stoics would ask us to look beyond that immediate feeling, to examine the actual outcome. The Roman philosopher Seneca, who wrote extensively on the subject of peace of mind, pointed directly at the emptiness of seeking this kind of external validation. He observed that when we tie our sense of worth and our tranquility to something outside of our control, like another person's agreement, we are building our happiness on a foundation of sand. That feeling of victory is a phantom. It evaporates because it was never real to begin with. It's an illusion. Think about the most common arena for arguments today: social media or political debates on television. Watch two people with opposing views go at it. The one who talks louder or lands the sharpest insult or cleverly twists the other's words might be declared the winner by the audience. But has any mind actually been changed? Almost never. In fact, the divide is usually deepened. The loser often just retreats, feeling resentful and more entrenched in their original position. The so-called victory doesn't create peace or understanding. It creates a hardened enemy and a wider chasm. The argument wasn't a search for truth. It was a performance, a spectacle, and a deeply unsatisfying one at that. Now bring that concept closer to home. Can you recall a time you had a heated disagreement with someone you care about, a partner, a parent, a close friend? Perhaps you argued about money or how to raise the kids, or even something as simple as what movie to watch. You marshaled your facts, you made your case persuasively, and eventually they threw up their hands and said, "Fine, you're right. Whatever you want, you won," but instead of feeling happy, you felt a strange hollowness. The evening was ruined. There was a cold tension in the room. You got your way, but you lost the warmth of the connection. That's the illusion Seneca warned us about. You were seeking the external validation of being right, and in chasing it, you sacrificed the internal state of harmony and goodwill, which was the only thing ever truly within your control. The victory was temporary and superficial, and the cost was real. This brings us to the very core of Stoic wisdom, the radical distinction between what is within our control and what is not. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius spent a great deal of his life reflecting on this, and he offers us perhaps the clearest path to tranquility. He wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That single sentence is a key that can unlock the entire game of argument. The strength he speaks of isn't the strength to dominate another person. It's the strength to remain unshaken, to maintain your peace and your character no matter what is happening around you. So, what exactly is within our control? The Stoics were very specific about this. Our control extends only to our own faculties, our judgments, our opinions, our desires, our aversions, and the actions we choose to take. In the heat of an argument, this translates to our decision to engage or not, the words we select, the tone we use, and most importantly, the meaning we assign to the other person's words. Everything else, and this is the crucial part, everything else is outside our control. This includes the other person's beliefs, their emotional state, their opinions of us, whether they listen, whether they agree, and ultimately, the outcome of the discussion. We can present our case with clarity and reason, but we cannot force it into their mind. Arguments become so frustrating precisely because they tempt us to do the impossible, to control the uncontrollable. We are essentially trying to reach into someone else's mind and rearrange their thoughts to match our own. Think about that for a second. How exhausting and utterly futile is that endeavor? It's like trying to control the weather by shouting at the clouds. You expend all your energy and achieve nothing but a sore throat. This is the trap. We get so focused on the external goal of changing someone's view that we completely neglect the internal goal of managing our own state. We sacrifice our own equanimity for a prize we can never truly possess. Consider a modern parallel you've likely experienced, a co-worker who is stubbornly committed to a flawed plan. You've seen the potential pitfalls, you have data to support your concern, and you lay it out in a meeting calmly and logically. But your co-worker digs in. They dismiss your points, they get defensive, they might even make it personal. The Stoic approach here isn't to redouble your efforts to control them, to talk louder, to repeat your points endlessly, to get angry. That is a surefire path to your own frustration and a damaged professional relationship. Instead, the shift in focus is profound. Your goal ceases to be, "I must make them see they are wrong." Your goal becomes, "I have stated my case with clarity and respect. I have done what is within my control. I now release my attachment to how they receive it." This isn't about giving up, it's about growing up. It's about recognizing the boundaries of your influence and choosing to put your energy only where it can actually make a difference, on your own conduct and your own peace of mind. So if the desire to control the uncontrollable is the trap, what is it that lures us into that trap time and time again? More often than not, the answer is our own ego. When we strip away the logical reasons we tell ourselves we're arguing, to find the truth, to correct a mistake, to help someone see, we often find a much more primal driver, the simple, deep-seated need to be right. To feel superior, to prove our intelligence, our morality, or our worth. The ancient Stoics saw this human tendency with crystal clarity, and they identified it as one of the greatest obstacles to a peaceful and rational life. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood the futility of seeking status better than most, offered some of the most direct advice on this. He said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. When our ego is in charge, we enter every discussion believing we already possess the truth. We aren't there to learn or to understand. We are there to perform, to conquer, to be validated. This need to appear superior is a dangerous trap because it completely inverts the purpose of communication. A discussion is no longer a shared exploration of an idea. It becomes a gladiatorial arena where the only goal is to emerge victorious over the other person. Our reason, which should be our guiding light, becomes nothing more than a weapon to be wielded in the service of our pride. We stop listening to understand the other person's point and start listening only to find the flaws in their logic that we can exploit for our next counterattack. We cherry-pick facts that support our side and dismiss anything that contradicts us. Our judgment becomes clouded because we are no longer evaluating information objectively. We are filtering everything through the desperate need to protect our self-image as the smart one, the right one. Consider how a minor, everyday disagreement can escalate into a major rift purely because of ego. Imagine two friends debating which route is faster to get to a concert. It starts innocently enough. One suggests the highway, the other insists the backroads are better this time of day. A simple, practical discussion, but then ego enters the chat. For the first friend, it's no longer about getting to the concert efficiently. It's about proving their navigational prowess. They've always been the human GPS of the friend group, and their identity feels threatened. For the second friend, it's about not being bossed around, about asserting their independence and local knowledge. The discussion stops being about roads and starts being about respect, intelligence, and dominance. What could have been a 30-second conversation, "You sure? Okay, let's try your way," now stretches into 20 minutes of heated debate, complete with pulling up traffic apps not to find the best answer but to prove a point. They might even take the slower route out of sheer stubbornness, arriving late and annoyed, having sacrificed a fun evening at the altar of their own pride. The Stoic would ask, what did anyone truly win? You may have proven your point about the route, but you lost the joy of the journey and the harmony of the friendship. The ego won the battle, but everyone lost the war. Epictetus advised cultivating humility not as a form of self-denigration, but as a practical tool for clear thinking and peace. Humility, in the Stoic sense, is simply an accurate assessment of reality. It is accepting that you do not know everything, that you could be wrong, and that your worth is not contingent on being right in every single interaction. It is the conscious decision to value the pursuit of truth over the performance of being right. This is incredibly freeing. When you detach your self-worth from the outcome of an argument, you can engage without that desperate, anxious energy. You can actually hear what the other person is saying. You can concede a point without feeling like you've lost a piece of your soul. You can say, "That's a good point I hadn't considered," and it feels like a moment of growth, not a moment of defeat. Take a moment to reflect on your own past conflicts. Can you identify an argument that went on far longer than it needed to, or that became more hurtful than the topic warranted? If you replay it in your mind, can you see the moment where your ego got involved? That flash of heat when you felt personally dismissed, the sharp tone you used not to clarify but to wound, the refusal to back down even when part of you knew you were being unreasonable. We've all been there. That is the ego taking the wheel. It convinces us that a difference of opinion is a personal attack, that a challenge to our idea is a challenge to our very being. Recognizing this pattern is the first and most powerful step in disarming it. The goal isn't to eliminate the ego, that's likely impossible, but to see it for what it is, a noisy, fearful passenger in the car of your mind, not the one who should be driving. So if ego is the fuel that keeps arguments burning, then our unchecked emotional reactions are the spark that lights the fire. We've all felt it, that sudden surge of heat, the tightening in the chest, the flood of words that want to burst out before our brain has even had a chance to process what was actually said. In that moment, we are not reasoning beings, we are reacting creatures, driven by a primal urge to defend or attack. The Stoics identified this as the critical juncture, the split second between an event and our response, and they built an entire practice around mastering it. They called it the discipline of assent, which simply means learning to pause and apply objective judgment before giving in to a reactive emotion. Marcus Aurelius dedicated countless passages in his meditations to this very idea. He wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That power to revoke our automatic judgment, that is the superpower Stoicism offers us in the midst of conflict. Think about how this works. Someone says something you find offensive or factually wrong. Your initial, raw impression is one of anger or indignation. It feels immediate and absolute, as if their words themselves forced you to feel this way. But the Stoic intervention happens right there. It's the mental equivalent of slamming on the brakes. Instead of letting that initial impression automatically dictate your response, you insert a moment of space. You pause, you take a breath, and in that breath you ask a few simple but powerful questions. Is this impression accurate? Is it helpful? Is this person acting out of malice, or perhaps out of ignorance, fear, or their own pain? By subjecting your initial emotional reaction to the cold light of reason, you reclaim control. You are no longer a puppet jerked around by external events. You become the author of your own response. Let's make this incredibly practical with a scenario almost everyone can relate to. You've spent hours carefully preparing a presentation for an important meeting at work. You're proud of it, you present your ideas, and immediately afterward a colleague pipes up and says in front of everyone, "I think this approach is fundamentally flawed." The data doesn't support these conclusions at all. Your first impression, your gut reaction, is a wave of hot embarrassment followed by defensive anger. Your heart starts pounding. The reactive, emotional response is to fire back, to defend your work point by point, to highlight your colleagues' past mistakes, to put them in their place and prove your superiority. This is the path of escalation. It turns a professional disagreement into a personal battle, damages teamwork, and makes everyone in the room uncomfortable. Now apply the Stoic pause. The comment lands, you feel the heat rise, but instead of speaking, you take one deliberate, silent breath. In that 2-second space, you apply reason. You assess the impression. My colleague said my approach is flawed. My initial feeling is anger and embarrassment. But is that helpful? What is within my control here? I cannot control their opinion or their choice to voice it in this way. I can control my response. Is it possible there is a kernel of truth in their criticism? Even if their delivery was poor, could this be an opportunity to improve the project? This brief internal dialogue completely reframes the moment. Your response is no longer reactive, it's chosen. You might say calmly, "Thank you for that feedback. Could you elaborate on which specific data points concern you? I'd like to understand your perspective better." This response is not weak, it is powerful. It de-escalates the situation, demonstrates professional maturity, and opens the door to genuine dialogue rather than bitter argument. You haven't conceded your point, you've simply chosen not to be controlled by your emotions. This practice is a muscle that needs to be built, and it starts with honest self-awareness. How often do your emotions dictate your argument style? Do you find yourself raising your voice because you feel you're not being heard? Do you resort to personal attacks when you feel your logic is being challenged? Do you shut down and retreat into sullen silence when things don't go your way? These are all forms of emotional reactivity. The goal isn't to become a cold, unfeeling robot. The Stoics weren't advocating for that. It's about ensuring that your emotions are informed by your reason, not overriding it. It's the difference between feeling angry and being angry. You can feel the emotion, acknowledge it, understand its message, but then you allow your rational mind to decide what to do with that energy. Maybe the energy of your anger is channeled into a more passionate but still respectful defense of your idea. Maybe the energy of your hurt is channeled into a vulnerable question that seeks to understand the other person's intent. When emotion is the servant of reason, your communication becomes far more effective and your inner peace remains intact. But mastering our own reactions is only half the equation. What about the person on the other side of the disagreement? Stoicism asks us to turn our attention outward as well, not to control, but to truly understand. This is where we discover one of the most transformative practices in the Stoic Toolkit, the art of listening. Not the kind of listening we usually do in an argument, where we're just politely waiting for our turn to talk, mentally rehearsing our rebuttal, but a deep, active, and radically non-defensive form of listening. The Roman statesman Seneca, a master of dialogue, placed immense value on this skill. He advised, "We should give to others the same right that we claim for ourselves the right to speak." This sounds simple, but it's profoundly difficult in practice. It means granting someone the space to express their complete thought, their entire perspective, without interruption, without judgment, and without the internal chatter of our own ego preparing its counterattack. True Stoic listening requires us to consciously set aside the very need to be right. You can't genuinely hear someone if your primary mission is to prove them wrong. It's like trying to listen to a symphony while you're busy tuning your own instrument. You might catch a few notes, but you'll completely miss the melody, the harmony, the entire emotional point of the piece. When we enter a discussion with the goal of winning, our listening becomes strategic and selective. We only hear the parts we can use against the other person. We filter their words through the lens of our own agenda. Stoic listening, in contrast, is about curiosity. It's an active investigation into another person's worldview. Your goal shifts from "how can I defeat this argument" to "how does this person see the world and why?" This doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It simply means you are prioritizing understanding over conquest. Imagine a common source of tension, a discussion with a family member about a sensitive political or social issue. You both hold deeply opposing views. The standard script is well rehearsed. You state your position, they state theirs, and then you both talk past each other, each becoming more frustrated and more entrenched. Now imagine applying Stoic listening. Instead of launching into your well-practiced points, you begin with a question. Help me understand what's led you to that conclusion. And then you do the hardest thing, you fall silent. You listen not for the flaws in their logic, but for the experiences, the fears, or the values that underpin their belief. You might hear a story about their childhood, a personal loss that shaped their perspective, or a deep-seated concern for their community. You're not listening to find ammunition, you're listening to find the human being behind the opinion. In doing so, something remarkable often happens. You might still disagree vehemently with their final conclusion, but you begin to understand the path that led them there. And in that understanding, you often find a sliver of common ground. It might not be agreement on the issue itself, but a shared value you both hold. Perhaps you both ultimately want safety for your families, or fairness in the system, or a better future for the next generation. The disagreement is now about the method, not the ultimate goal. This shared value becomes a tiny island of connection in a sea of disagreement. The conversation is no longer a battle between two enemies. It becomes a difficult dialogue between two complex human beings who, despite their differences, share a common humanity. This shift doesn't always resolve the argument, but it almost always drains it of its poisonous animosity. It allows you to disagree without dehumanizing the other person, which is a victory for your own character and peace of mind. This profound shift in focus from winning to simply expressing what we believe to be true is the essence of what Stoics mean by detachment from outcomes. It's not about becoming apathetic or disengaged. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about engaging with full sincerity and effort, but then completely releasing our grip on what happens after we've done our part. The great teacher Epictetus, who had very little control over his own life as a former slave, framed this as the core of a free person's mindset. He instructed his students, "In the exercise of your powers, do your work without attachment to the results." This is the art of living. For our purposes, we could call it the art of arguing. Your work is to present your case with clarity, reason, and good intent. The result, whether the other person scoffs, agrees, or simply walks away, is not your work. It is not your burden to carry. This concept can feel counterintuitive because we're so conditioned to believe that a failed outcome means our effort was wasted. But the Stoics would argue that the value was in the integrity of the effort itself. Your character is expressed and strengthened in the doing, not in the receiving. Think of a musician who practices for thousands of hours to perform a perfect concerto. They pour their heart and soul into the performance. But if the audience gives a lukewarm applause, does that negate the beauty and discipline of the performance itself? Of course not. The value was in the act of creating the music. The audience's reaction is a separate event, outside the musician's control. In the same way, the value of your argument lies in the clarity of your thought, the respect in your delivery, and the integrity of your intention. The other person's reaction is a separate event. Detachment isn't cold, it's liberating. It allows you to participate fully in life's dialogues without being emotionally wrecked by them. History offers us a powerful example of this principle in action with the philosopher Diogenes the Cynic, a figure the Stoics deeply admired. Diogenes was known for his provocative and often shocking public behavior, all designed to wake people up to a simpler, more virtuous way of life. He would often engage people in the marketplace in debates. The stories tell of him speaking profound truths to crowds who would frequently respond by laughing at him, ignoring him, or even throwing things at him to drive him away. And yet, there is no record of Diogenes ever becoming enraged or despondent over this rejection. He didn't argue to win their approval or to be crowned the winner of the debate. He argued because he felt it was his duty to speak the truth as he saw it. His satisfaction came from having done his part, from having planted a seed of an idea. Whether that seed grew or was trampled underfoot was not his concern. He was detached from the outcome, and that detachment was the source of his incredible resilience and inner peace. Now, bring this ancient wisdom into a modern context. Imagine walking into your next difficult conversation with this mindset. Your goal is not to walk out having changed the other person's mind. Your goal is to walk out knowing you stated your truth calmly, clearly, and respectfully. How would that change your energy? Instead of the nervous tension of needing to win, you'd feel the calm confidence of someone who has done their job well. If the other person dismisses you, you can genuinely think, "I have said what I needed to say, the rest is not up to me," and move on with your day without carrying the frustration home. This is the real victory that Stoicism offers. It's a victory that can never be taken from you because it resides entirely within your own conduct. It transforms argument from a source of anxiety into an exercise in character building. This brings us to a deeply practical and often uncomfortable Stoic insight: the sheer futility of trying to correct other people. We've all felt that itch, that compelling urge to point out someone's mistake, to fix their flawed logic, to offer that piece of unsolicited advice that we're so sure will improve their life. It feels helpful, even righteous, but the Stoics would ask us to pause and consider the actual cost. Marcus Aurelius, in his private meditations, constantly returned to this theme of acceptance. He wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." A key part of that acceptance is letting go of the arrogant assumption that we know what's best for everyone else, that it is our duty to reshape them according to our own blueprint. Think about the last time someone offered you unsolicited advice on how to parent your child, manage your career, or even how to load the dishwasher correctly. How did it feel? Even if the advice was technically sound, the act of receiving it unasked for often triggers a defensive reaction. We feel judged, micromanaged, and implicitly told that we are not competent. Now flip the perspective. When we are the ones offering the correction, we often blind ourselves to this reaction. We are so focused on the content of the message, the right way to do something, that we completely ignore the emotional context of the relationship. We prioritize being right over being connected. The Stoic question is not, "Is this factually correct?" but, "Is this useful and kind? Is it within my control to have them accept it?" Often the answer is no. Consider the classic example of correcting someone's grammar or pronunciation in a social setting. You're in a conversation and a friend says "supposedly" instead of "supposedly." The factual part of your brain twitches. The urge to correct is strong, but what is the potential gain? They might say the word correctly next time. And what is the potential cost? You've just publicly highlighted a minor flaw, potentially embarrassing them and making them self-conscious about their speech around you. You've traded a moment of linguistic accuracy for a slice of social trust. The Stoic would see this as a terrible trade. You've exerted effort to control something outside your sphere, another person's vocabulary, and in the process, you've damaged something within your control, the quality of your interaction and the health of the relationship. This isn't about never giving advice or never speaking up when something truly important is at stake. It's about developing the wisdom to discern the difference between a matter of genuine consequence and a matter of mere preference or trivial error. It's about asking ourselves a simple filter question before we speak. Is this important enough to potentially strain the connection? So many of the corrections we feel compelled to make are about minor preferences: the right way to fold a towel, the correct route to drive, the best brand of ketchup. These are not truths, they are opinions masquerading as truths. Forcing them on others is not an act of virtue, it's an act of control, and it's almost always futile. People do not change deep-seated habits or beliefs because of a nagging comment. They change through personal reflection and experience. Marcus Aurelius offered a more compassionate alternative: to accept people as they are, flaws and all. He reminds himself, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil. This isn't a cynical view of humanity. It's a realistic and merciful one. He isn't saying people are bad. He's saying they are operating with a limited understanding, just as we all are at times. When someone acts foolishly or holds a mistaken belief, it is not a personal affront to you. It is a reflection of their current state of knowledge, their upbringing, their fears, their entire life experience. To get angry at them for this is like getting angry at a river for flowing downstream. It is their nature. Your peace comes from accepting this nature, not from trying to dam the river with your bare hands. Think about a time you let go of the need to correct someone. Perhaps a family member tells a story you've heard a dozen times, and they get a minor detail wrong each time. The old you might have interrupted. Actually, it was Tuesday, not Wednesday, but the you practicing stoic acceptance simply lets it go. You listen to the spirit of the story, you enjoy their pleasure in telling it, and you connect with the person rather than nitpicking the facts. The moment passes and the connection remains strong, undisturbed by a triviality. That feeling of calm you retain is the real victory. It's a victory of harmony over pedantry, of relationship over ego. So where does this leave us? It asks us to cultivate a new kind of strength, the strength to sometimes be silent, the strength to tolerate minor errors and imperfections in others, just as we desperately hope they will tolerate ours. It's the wisdom to save our energy and our social capital for the rare moments when a correction is truly vital, not to the accuracy of a story, but to the safety or well-being of a person. In the vast majority of our daily interactions, the most powerful and peaceful thing we can do is to simply let people be. This ability to let go of the need to correct others is powerful, but it's only the beginning. Stoicism offers us an even more profound tool for disarming conflict before it even begins, and it lies in a practice we might not immediately associate with the Stoics, the deliberate cultivation of empathy. While they are often portrayed as unfeeling logicians, the Stoics were deeply concerned with human connection and understanding. They believed that seeing the world from another person's vantage point was not a sign of weakness, but an act of profound rationality and a key to social harmony. Seneca, in his profound letters to his friend Lucilius, frequently touched on our shared human nature and our universal fallibility. He wrote, "We are all mad, not merely one or two of us, but everyone." He didn't mean this as an insult, but as a sobering and equalizing fact. Every single one of us is operating with a limited perspective, shaped by our unique wounds, our biases, our incomplete knowledge, and our personal fears. To expect anyone, including ourselves, to be perfectly rational and objective at all times is to set an impossible standard that guarantees disappointment and conflict. This Stoic form of empathy isn't about fuzzy feelings or emotional merging. It's a disciplined intellectual exercise in perspective-taking. It's the conscious act of stepping outside of your own skull and making a sincere effort to reconstruct the world as another person might be seeing it. What experiences have they had that you haven't? What fears might be driving their stubborn position? What hidden pressures or private struggles are influencing their behavior in this moment? When someone acts in a way we find frustrating or illogical, our default reaction is to attribute it to a character flaw, their being difficult, ignorant, or malicious. The Stoic asks us to pause that judgment and instead attribute it to a perspective flaw. They are not a villain in your story, they are the hero in their own, acting in ways that make perfect sense from within the confines of their own understanding. Let's make this concrete with a scenario. Imagine you're working on a team project with a colleague who is consistently resistant to any new idea you propose. They shoot down suggestions, they insist on doing things the old way, and they seem to be a roadblock to progress. Your initial ego-driven interpretation might be that they are threatened by you, or that they are simply lazy and don't want the extra work. This interpretation leads to frustration, resentment, and probably a more confrontational approach. Now, apply the Stoic empathy exercise. Instead of judging their character, get curious about their context. Maybe you learn that 5 years ago, this person pushed for a similar new initiative that failed spectacularly and very publicly, costing the company money and damaging their reputation. That failure isn't just a data point to them, it's a living, breathing trauma. Their resistance isn't about you at all, it's about a deep, visceral fear of reliving that humiliation. They aren't trying to be difficult, they are trying to feel safe. This single shift in perspective completely transforms the situation. Your frustration melts into understanding. You no longer see an obstacle, you see a wounded, cautious person. This doesn't mean you abandon your new idea, but it changes how you approach them. Instead of trying to overpower their objections, you might sit down with them and say, "I understand there's some history here with projects like this. I'd really value your insight on how we could avoid the pitfalls you've seen before." You've acknowledged their experience and invited them in as a valued advisor, not an opponent. You've addressed the real need, safety, rather than just arguing about the surface-level idea. This practice is what Seneca was pointing toward when he spoke of our shared madness. Your colleague is acting from a place of fear, a kind of temporary madness. So have you at times, so have I. We all get hijacked by our past experiences and our emotions. Recognizing this shared fallibility creates a foundation of patience and compassion that makes genuine dialogue possible. It allows you to disagree with the idea without dismissing the human being behind it. It softens your response because you're no longer responding to a caricature of a stubborn fool. You're responding to a complex person with a history you may never fully know. This week, I encourage you to try this Stoic empathy exercise. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, big or small, before you craft your rebuttal, take a moment to actively construct the other person's reality. Don't just ask yourself, why are they wrong? Ask yourself, why does this make sense to them? What piece of the puzzle might they see that I am missing? What fear or hope or past experience could be shaping this view? You don't have to agree with their conclusion, but by making the effort to understand their path to that conclusion, you drain the conflict of its personal animosity. You move from a battle of wills to a shared exploration of a problem, and in doing so, you might just find that the real victory was never about being right, but about connecting more deeply with the flawed, beautiful, and entirely human people we share this world with. And sometimes the most powerful and rational response we can muster is to say nothing at all. Stoicism champions the wise and strategic use of silence, recognizing that not every argument deserves our energy, and not every critic deserves a response. This isn't about surrender or weakness. It's about the profound strength required to discern a battle that cannot be won, or more importantly, one that isn't worth winning. Epictetus offers perhaps the clearest guidance on this. He draws a crucial distinction that can save us endless frustration, advising, if a person speaks unfairly or acts in an unkind manner, remember that he does it in the belief that it is the right thing for him to do. He cannot possibly be guided by your view of what is right, but only by his own. Therefore, if he judges wrongly, it is he who is harmed, since he is the one who has been deceived. He then delivers the practical application of this insight. If you start off on a journey and you decide that the wrong road is the right one, how much help is it if someone else has the right idea about the road? It will not get you anywhere. In the same way, if someone is acting on a wrong judgment, he is the one who suffers for it, not you. If you recognize that his premise is wrong, then you must realize that any harm resulting from his action affects him alone, for it is he who has been misled. This is the Stoic litmus test for engagement. is the other person reasoning in good faith? Are they open to logic, to evidence, to a shared pursuit of truth, or are they merely performing, venting, or seeking to provoke a reaction? Engaging with someone who is not reasoning in good faith is like trying to play chess with a pigeon. It will knock over all the pieces, strut around as if it has one, and defect on the board. You cannot win because they are not playing by the rules of reason. Your only move is to refuse to play their game. Your silence in this case is not a concession. It is a declaration that you value your peace and your time more than you value the empty satisfaction of scoring points against an opponent who doesn't even recognize the scoreboard. Nowhere is this principle more vital than in the digital arena of online comments and social media debates. The anonymous troll, the bad faith actor, the person who hurls insults from behind a keyboard, they are the modern embodiment of what Epictetus warned against. They are not there to learn, to understand, or to have a dialogue. Their entire goal is to elicit an emotional response, to drag you down to their level of agitation. Crafting a thoughtful, logical reply to such a person is a complete waste of your most precious resource, your attention and your equanimity. The Stoic response is to simply scroll on. Do not feed the troll. Your silence is a fortress they cannot breach. It protects your inner citadel from their pointless noise. You win by denying them the one thing they want, your reaction. But this wisdom applies just as powerfully in our personal lives, often in more painful and complex ways. Consider the annual family gathering where a certain relative always seems to bring up that one inflammatory political or religious topic. You know the script by heart. You've had the same argument a dozen times. It always ends the same way, with raised voices, hurt feelings, and a lingering chill that lasts for days. The Stoic question here is not, how can I finally win this argument with my uncle? But, is this a fruitful use of my energy and our limited time together? Recognizing that this is a patterned, fruitless exchange allows you to make a different choice. You can consciously choose withdrawal. This doesn't mean storming off in a huff. It can be a gentle, deliberate disengagement. When the topic arises, you might simply say, "You know, we've discussed this before and we see it differently. I'd rather hear about how your garden is doing," and then change the subject. Or, if the person persists, you can physically remove yourself, go help in the kitchen, take a walk, engage someone else in conversation. This is not cowardice. It is the courage to prioritize the overall harmony of the family gathering over your ego's need to be proven right in a battle that has no victors. Think back on your own history of disagreements. Can you identify a moment when your words only poured gasoline on a fire? A time when you continued to argue long after it was clear the conversation was going in circles, leaving you both exhausted and further apart. Now replay that scene with the power of strategic silence. Imagine taking a breath after their provocation and simply letting it hang in the air, not with resentment but with calm detachment. Imagine offering a slight nod to acknowledge you heard them and then turning your attention elsewhere. How much emotional energy would you have saved? How much dignity would you have retained? Silence in these moments becomes an act of profound self-respect. It is the ultimate demonstration of the Stoic ideal that your peace is more valuable than your point. It is the understanding that you do not need to have the last word to have won the inner battle for your own tranquility. So if we've been chasing an illusion of victory and learning to disengage from fruitless battles, what are we actually striving for? The Stoics propose a radical and deeply satisfying alternative. They invite us to completely reframe what it means to win. Real victory, in their view, has nothing to do with the external outcome of the debate and everything to do with the internal state you manage to preserve throughout it. It's not about conquering your opponent, It's about conquering your own chaotic impulses, your pride, and your anger. This is the ultimate shift. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who faced countless political arguments and personal betrayals, put it perfectly when he wrote, "The true victory is victory over oneself." Those who are slaves to their passions will always be defeated. That word, slaves, is so powerful. When we let our need to be right control our actions and dictate our emotional state, we are not free. We are enslaved to the opinions of others, to the outcome of the conversation, to things we were never meant to control. The real triumph is breaking those chains. Think about the last time you managed to stay calm during a deeply frustrating argument. Maybe a customer was being unreasonably rude, or a loved one was criticizing you unfairly. In that moment, you felt the heat rise, the sharp retort forming on your tongue, but you paused, you took a breath, you chose not to escalate. In that moment of choice, you weren't losing the argument. You were winning a far more important one. You were winning the argument against your own worst instincts. You maintained your integrity. You held onto your equanimity. That feeling afterward, the quiet pride, the lack of regret, the sense of being unshaken, that is the true Stoic triumph. It's a victory that no one can take from you because it happened entirely within you. It doesn't require anyone else's acknowledgement or surrender. It is complete and self-contained. This inner calm amid external conflict is the most reliable indicator that you are practicing Stoicism, not just reading about it. Anyone can be peaceful when sitting alone on a quiet beach. The test comes when you're in the storm of disagreement. Can you be the calm center of that storm? This doesn't mean you become a passive doormat. You can still state your case firmly and clearly, but you do so from a place of inner stability, not from a place of frantic need. Your words carry more weight because they aren't laden with desperate emotion. Your logic is clearer because it isn't clouded by anger. You become like a deep-rooted tree in a high wind. You might sway, but you will not break. The wind, in this case the heated words of another, blows against you, but it finds nothing to grab onto. It simply moves past, leaving you standing, intact and at peace. So I want to offer you a challenge, a personal audit of sorts. Take a moment to truly define what winning means to you now. Not what it should mean or what you've been told it means, but what it has actually meant in your recent conflicts. When you walk away from a disagreement, what is the feeling you're secretly hoping for? Is it the fleeting, hollow satisfaction of having made the other person back down? Or is it the deeper, more durable satisfaction of knowing you acted with character, that you listened with patience, spoke with reason, and managed your emotions with maturity? One definition of victory leaves you dependent on the actions of others, forever chasing a ghost. The other definition places the trophy firmly in your own hands, a prize you can claim in every single interaction, regardless of how the other person behaves. The first is a gamble, the second is a practice, and it is a practice that, over time, builds an unshakable confidence and a profound sense of personal freedom. This practice of mental preparation, of walking through potential challenges before they happen, is a cornerstone of Stoic resilience. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. But it's far less gloomy than it sounds. It's not about dwelling on the negative. It's about inoculating yourself against surprise and emotional hijacking. By calmly and rationally envisioning what could go wrong, you rob future adversity of its power to shock you and knock you off balance. Seneca was a master of this. He would actually set aside time to mentally rehearse potential misfortunes, not to make himself anxious, but to make himself ready. He wrote, "We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events." He wasn't practicing pessimism, he was practicing preparedness. He was building a mental fortress of composure so that when life inevitably threw a curveball, he was already inside, safe and collected, rather than being struck and stunned outside the walls. We can apply this powerful tool directly to the arena of arguments and difficult conversations. So often, our worst reactions happen in the heat of the moment because we are caught off guard. Someone says something we didn't expect, and our emotional brain, our fight or flight system, leaps into the driver's seat before our rational mind has even put on its seatbelt. Premeditation is how we switch that dynamic. It's the process of taking that moment of surprise and moving it from the actual event to the quiet safety of your own mind, hours or days before. You get to experience the initial shock in a controlled environment where you can then craft a wise, considered response at your own pace. Let's make this incredibly practical. Imagine you have to have a difficult conversation with your manager at work. Perhaps you need to ask for a raise, or maybe you have to deliver some negative feedback about a project that's going off the rails. Your stomach is already in knots just thinking about it. The reactive pattern would be to avoid thinking about it until the last second, then walk into the meeting nervous and unprepared, hoping for the best but primed for a defensive reaction. The Stoic approach is the opposite. You deliberately sit down the day before and you walk through the meeting in your mind. You don't just visualize everything going perfectly, that's just fantasy, and it sets you up for a harder fall. You visualize the potential challenges. You ask yourself the Stoic questions. What is within my control here? My preparation, my tone, my facts, my request. What is not within my control? My manager's mood, their immediate reaction, the company's budget constraints, their final decision. Now you go deeper. You imagine specific, difficult scenarios. What if they immediately say no to the raise? What if they get defensive and blame you for the project's problems? What if they dismiss your concerns outright? As you envision each of these possibilities, you feel that initial jolt of anxiety. But because you are safe at your desk, you can pause that feeling. You can breathe, and then you can decide with a clear head how you will choose to respond. If they say no to the raise, your premeditated response might be, I understand budget can be a constraint. Could we then discuss what specific milestones or achievements would put me in a stronger position for this conversation in 6 months? If they become defensive, your prepared response could be, my intention isn't to place blame, but to understand the obstacles we're facing so we can find a solution together. You are not scripting the entire conversation. That would be rigid and unnatural. You are scripting your anchor points, the calm, principled responses you can return to if the waters get rough. You are building mental muscle memory for wisdom. By the time you actually walk into the meeting, something remarkable has happened. The potential for surprise has been drastically reduced. You've already faced the worst-case scenarios in your mind, and you have a plan. This doesn't guarantee a specific outcome, but it guarantees something far more valuable, your own composure. You can now listen more actively because you're not scrambling in a panic. You can respond more thoughtfully because you've already deactivated your emotional tripwires. You engage from a place of strength and stability, not fear and reactivity. This is how premeditation transforms conflict from a threat into an opportunity to practice the virtues of courage, justice, and self-discipline. I encourage you to try this before your next potentially challenging discussion, whether it's with a partner, a parent, or a colleague. Invest just 5 minutes in this Stoic rehearsal. Don't just worry about it, prepare for it, think it through, anticipate the objections, hear the harsh words in your mind first, and then decide how you will meet them, not with equal harshness, but with the calm, firm clarity of someone who has already seen the storm coming and is therefore not afraid to stand in the rain. Now, after all this talk of serious reflection and disciplined restraint, you might be picturing the ideal Stoic as a stone-faced, unflappable statue of seriousness. But that's a common misconception. The Stoics weren't against joy or laughter, they were against being controlled by irrational passions, and sometimes the most rational and powerful tool you can wield in a tense moment is a well-placed bit of humor. This isn't about sarcasm or mockery, which are just other forms of attack. This is about using lightness as a shield to deflect tension without escalating the conflict or sacrificing your principles. It's a way to gently remind everyone, including yourself, that the stakes might not be as high as our egos are making them out to be. Even the solemn Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, advised a form of this. While he championed clear and direct communication, he also suggested that when we must correct others, we should do so gently and without making a show of it. This gentle correction can often be delivered more effectively with a smile than with a scowl. Think about how this works in practice. Humor, when used skillfully, can act as a pressure release valve. It can momentarily break the frame of a conflict, shifting everyone's perspective from a combative, me versus you dynamic to a more collaborative, us versus this silly situation mindset. It acknowledges the tension without fueling it. For instance, imagine you're in a long planning meeting that's starting to get heated. Two colleagues are going back and forth over a minor detail in a project timeline, their voices rising, their bodies tensing. You can see the entire discussion is about to derail over something trivial. Jumping in with a logical, stern, "Hey, let's all calm down," might just add another layer of tension. But what if you leaned in with a light-hearted grin and said, "I think we're about to declare war over whether the bullet points should be round or square. Maybe we should table this and get the UN involved." The absurdity of the image bringing in the United Nations over formatting can puncture the bubble of self-importance that arguments often inflate around themselves. It's not making fun of the people, it's making fun of the intensity of the moment. It allows everyone to take a mental step back, chuckle, and reassess what they're actually arguing about. The disagreement might not be instantly resolved, but the hostile energy is dissolved, creating space for a more reasonable conversation to continue. This Stoic use of humor is a form of tactical wisdom. It requires you to be emotionally observant enough to sense the rising tension and mentally agile enough to offer a different, lighter perspective. It's a demonstration of your own inner control. You are not so consumed by the conflict that you can't see its inherent silliness, and crucially, it allows you to hold your ground without creating an enemy. You haven't conceded your point, you've simply chosen not to advance it with a battering ram. You've used wit to protect your peace and potentially the peace of everyone in the room. Can you recall a time you successfully used a little humor to ease a dispute? Perhaps you made a funny, self-deprecating comment about your own stubbornness during a silly argument with your partner, instantly melting the tension. Or maybe you laughed at a misunderstanding with a stranger instead of getting offended, turning a potential confrontation into a moment of shared human connection. Those moments are small victories in the Stoic sense. They are victories of character and connection over conflict and pride. This profound shift in perspective brings us to one of the most liberating Stoic principles of all: the radical acceptance of another person's absolute freedom to disagree with you. We spend so much of our energy in arguments trying to dismantle the other person's position, to prove them wrong, to get them to surrender their view and adopt ours. But the Stoics ask a simple, piercing question: by what right do we assume this authority over another mind? The teacher Epictetus, who valued inner freedom above all else, offered some of the most direct guidance on this. He said, "Remember that it is not the person who insults you or attacks you who harms you, but the view you take of these events that harms you." He's pointing us back to that fundamental dichotomy of control. Another person's opinion, their agreement or disagreement, is an external event. It is outside the fortress of your will. Your peace is harmed not by the opinion itself, but by your own judgment that this opinion is a terrible thing that must be changed. You are the one choosing to be disturbed by it. This is about more than just tolerance. It's about a deep and genuine respect for the autonomy of other human beings. Every person is the sovereign ruler of their own mind, for better or for worse. They have the right to their own conclusions, their own mistakes, and their own journey of understanding. To try to force your truth upon them is not an act of enlightenment. It's an act of intellectual tyranny. It's like being a guest in someone's home and trying to rearrange their furniture because you prefer it a different way. It's their home, their mental furniture, however messy or unconventional it may seem to you, is theirs to arrange. Your only responsibility is to how you behave as a guest in that space. Think about a close friend who holds a political or lifestyle belief that is completely opposite to your own. Perhaps they have views on money, relationships, or health that you find not just incorrect but potentially harmful. The instinct born from care and concern is to argue, to persuade, to rescue them from their own perceived error. But the Stoic approach requires a more nuanced form of care. It asks you to differentiate between expressing your concern once with kindness and clarity and the futile, relationship-straining effort to repeatedly correct them. You can say your piece, you can offer your perspective, and then you must consciously and deliberately release the outcome. You accept that their mind is their own. You trust in their capacity to learn from their own experiences, just as you have learned from yours. This acceptance is not approval. You are not endorsing their view. You are simply endorsing their fundamental human right to hold it. You are choosing to value the friendship itself over the need for ideological alignment. This practice is incredibly difficult because it goes against our deep-seated tribal wiring. We are conditioned to believe that agreement equals safety and disagreement equals threat. But Stoicism asks us to rewire that instinct through reason. The real threat to our peace is not the disagreement itself, but our own frantic, ego-driven reaction to it. When we can truly internalize that another person's wrongness is their problem to live with, not our problem to fix, a tremendous weight lifts from our shoulders. We are freed from the exhausting and impossible burden of managing everyone else's beliefs, so I want you to take a moment for a truly honest reflection. In your daily life, how often do you actually, genuinely respect another person's right to be wrong? Not just tolerate it with silent seething, but truly accept it as a natural part of the human experience. Think about the driver who cuts you off, the coworker who insists on an inefficient method, the relative who shares a factually inaccurate story. In those moments, is your first impulse one of calm acceptance, or is it a surge of judgment and a compulsion to correct? This isn't about becoming passive in the face of genuine harm, but about developing the wisdom to pick your battles. Most of the things we feel compelled to correct are not matters of life and death. They are scratches on the surface of our ego. By letting people be wrong, by granting them that freedom, you are not weak. You are exercising a profound strength, the strength to focus your energy only where it can actually make a difference, and to find unshakable peace regardless of the wrongness that swirls around you. Now let's explore one of the most practical and immediately useful tools in the Stoic toolkit for managing conflict, a technique known as negative visualization. This might sound counterintuitive at first. Why would we want to imagine things going wrong? But the Stoic purpose isn't to create anxiety, it's to build immunity to it. The Roman philosopher Seneca, who wrote extensively about preparing for life's challenges, explained this practice beautifully. He suggested that we should periodically anticipate potential setbacks and losses, not because they will definitely happen, but because by facing them in our minds first, we rob them of their power to shock and destabilize us when they occur. He wrote, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." This mental rehearsal creates a kind of emotional callus, making us more resilient when adversity actually strikes. We can apply this powerful concept directly to the arena of arguments and difficult conversations. Think about how you typically approach a discussion you're nervous about. Maybe it's asking for a raise, confronting a friend about a hurtful behavior, or discussing finances with a partner. Our natural tendency is to hope for the best, to visualize everything going perfectly, with the other person seeing our point immediately and agreeing with us completely. While this optimistic daydream feels good in the moment, it sets us up for a much harder fall if things don't go according to our fantasy. We've invested so much emotional energy in that single, perfect outcome that any deviation feels like a personal failure. The disappointment is amplified because we're completely unprepared for it. Negative visualization flips this script. Instead of imagining only the best-case scenario, you deliberately and calmly walk through the worst-case scenarios in your mind. Let's say you're preparing to ask your boss for a promotion. The optimistic fantasy is that they immediately agree, congratulate you on your work, and offer you even more than you asked for. The negative visualization approach would have you sit down beforehand and consider the opposite. What if they say no immediately? What if they get defensive and criticize your performance? What if they dismiss your contributions? As you imagine each of these possibilities, you sit with the initial sting. You feel that flash of embarrassment, that surge of defensive anger. But because you're doing this in the safety of your own mind, away from the actual event, you can then apply your stoic reasoning. You would remind yourself, their response is outside my control. My worth is not determined by their answer. I can only control how I present my case and how I conduct myself. If they say no, it does not mean I have failed. It simply means I have more information about where I stand. This process doesn't make the potential rejection feel good, but it makes it feel manageable. It transforms it from a terrifying, unknown monster into a known quantity that you've already grappled with and survived in your imagination. When you actually have the conversation, the emotional charge is significantly lower. If the worst does happen, it feels familiar rather than shocking. You've already visited this country in your mind. You have a map and you know your way around. This allows you to respond with far more composure and far less reactive emotion. The true power of this exercise lies in its ability to foster a healthy sense of detachment. By mentally preparing for failure, you loosen its grip on you. You realize that even if the argument goes completely off the rails, you will be okay. Your world will not end. Your value as a person remains intact. This detachment is not indifference, it's a form of emotional freedom. It allows you to enter the discussion with a clear head, focused on expressing your truth effectively rather than being desperate for a specific outcome. You become like a surgeon performing a delicate operation, calm, focused, and prepared for complications, rather than a gambler desperately praying for a lucky roll of the dice. So I invite you to try this before your next challenging discussion. Take just 5 minutes in a quiet space, close your eyes, and vividly imagine the conversation going as poorly as it possibly could. Hear the other person's harshest words, feel the sting of their rejection or dismissal, sit with that discomfort. Then, consciously remind yourself of what is within your control and what is not. Plan how you might respond with grace and dignity, even in that worst-case scenario. This small investment of time is like putting on emotional armor before a battle. It doesn't guarantee you won't get hit, but it ensures the blows won't wound you as deeply, allowing you to stay standing, clear-minded, and true to your principles no matter how the conversation unfolds. This commitment to concise and honest communication wasn't just a stylistic preference for the Stoics, it was a direct extension of their core philosophy. If our goal is to focus only on what is within our control, our own judgments and actions, then our speech should reflect that focus. Unnecessary elaboration, emotional exaggeration, and long-winded arguments are often just attempts to control the uncontrollable, to forcefully convince, to manipulate a reaction, or to protect our ego. Epictetus, who was remarkably direct in his teachings, gave perhaps the clearest instruction on this. He advised, "Let your speech be both brief and full of sense. For you ought to know that what is of great value is expressed in few words." That phrase, "full of sense," is so crucial. He isn't advocating for being terse or dismissive. He's calling for speech that is dense with meaning and purpose, where every word carries weight and intention, and where empty chatter and emotional filler are consciously stripped away. Think about how this principle plays out in a modern disagreement. Imagine a couple arguing about household chores. One partner feels they are doing more than their share. The reactive, emotionally charged approach might be a long, rambling monologue. "You never help out around here. I'm always the one loading the dishwasher and taking out the trash and folding the laundry, and it's like I'm completely invisible. I'm just so tired of having to do everything myself all the time." While the feelings are valid, the delivery is a scattered barrage of accusations and generalizations. The listener's natural defense mechanisms go up immediately. They hear an attack and stop listening to the content, preparing their own counterattack about all the things they do. Now, apply the Stoic principle of brevity and clarity. The same concern could be expressed as, "I feel overwhelmed by the housework. I would like us to discuss a more balanced division of the chores." This statement is brief. It is full of sense. It states a personal feeling without blame, identifies the issue clearly, and proposes a collaborative solution. It is far harder to argue against this calm, clear statement. It doesn't give the other person a dozen different emotional hooks to grab onto and rebut. It invites a conversation rather than initiating a battle. The power of this concise approach lies in its precision. It surgically identifies the core issue without the collateral damage of hyperbolic language. This economy of words is a form of respect for the other person's time and intelligence, and for your own peace of mind. A long, emotional argument drains your energy and often leaves you feeling exposed and regretful for things you said in the heat of the moment. A clear, concise statement preserves your dignity. It allows you to stand firmly in your truth without becoming unhinged by emotion. It demonstrates that you have mastered the content of your own thoughts before attempting to communicate them to someone else. This week, I encourage you to practice this. Before entering a potentially difficult conversation, take a moment to distill your point down to its absolute essence. What is the one core message that needs to be understood? Strip away the blame, the history, the emotional commentary. Present that clear, simple truth calmly. You may find that a single sentence, spoken with conviction and clarity, does more to advance understanding than 1,000 words spoken in frustration. This deep need for external validation, this hunger for approval, is perhaps one of the most powerful and hidden drivers behind our endless arguments. We tell ourselves we are debating for truth, for justice, for the correct outcome, but if we are brutally honest with ourselves, we often find a much more vulnerable motive lurking beneath the surface. a simple, aching desire to be seen as right, as smart, as morally superior. We are not just presenting a case, we are performing for an audience, hoping for applause in the form of agreement. And when that applause doesn't come, we feel a sting of rejection that goes far deeper than the topic at hand. The Stoics identified this craving as a major source of our unhappiness, a leak in our inner peace that we are constantly trying to plug with the opinions of others. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in his private journal, offered the antidote. He advised, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." He is directing our gaze away from the fickle, external court of public opinion and back to the only reliable source of validation we will ever have, our own reasoned judgment and our own moral character. This shift is incredibly difficult because we are social creatures, hardwired to seek belonging and status within our tribe. In ancient times, being ostracized or disapproved of could mean literal death. Today, that same primal fear manifests in the modern arena, the social media debate. Think about the dynamics of a heated online exchange. You post a comment with a particular viewpoint. Someone replies with a strong counter-argument. Your pulse quickens. You craft a response, but as you type, part of your mind isn't just focused on the logic, it's envisioning the unseen audience. You're thinking about the likes your rebuttal will get, the supportive comments that will pile up, the virtual pats on the back from people who agree with you. The win you're chasing is no longer about the truth of the matter. It's about the dopamine hit of social validation. The argument becomes a performance, and the metrics of likes and shares become the scorecard. You are no longer a truth seeker, you are an actor on a stage, and your peace of mind is held hostage by the reviews. But this performance is a trap with no exit. Even if you win the thread, even if your comment gets more likes and your opponent's is buried, the satisfaction is hollow and fleeting. It lasts only until the next notification, the next disagreement. You have tied your sense of worth to something completely outside your control, the ever-shifting winds of popular opinion. You are building your house on sand. Marcus Aurelius warned himself against this, writing, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." It's a stunning paradox. We are the ones who have to live with ourselves every single moment of our lives, yet we will readily sacrifice our own inner calm for the approval of strangers whose names we don't even know. This need for approval doesn't just poison online interactions. It seeps into our most important relationships. Consider a disagreement with a parent about your life choices. Part of you wants to explain your path to help them understand, but another, deeper part is hoping for their blessing, their approval. Their disagreement feels like a personal rejection because you have unconsciously linked their approval of your choices with their love for you. The argument becomes charged with an emotional weight it cannot bear. The Stoic intervention here is to consciously uncouple those two things. You can still explain your choices with clarity and respect. That is within your control. But you must release your grip on their approval that is not. Your worth and your contentment must come from within, from the knowledge that you are living according to your own values, not from their external sign-off. This is the real meaning of digging within for that fountain of good. It is finding the confidence to say, "I understand you disagree, and I respect your perspective, but this is the path I have chosen for myself." That statement comes from a place of inner strength, not a place of neediness. So I want to pose a challenging but vital question for you to sit with. The next time you find yourself gearing up for an argument or in the middle of one, press pause for just a moment and ask yourself with raw honesty, what is my real goal here? Am I arguing to uncover a piece of truth, to understand a different perspective, to find a collaborative solution? Or am I arguing because I need this person or the people watching to agree with me, to validate my intelligence, to confirm that I am on the right side? The answer might be uncomfortable. We often dress up our need for approval in the noble clothing of truth-seeking. But if you listen closely to the feeling in your gut, you can usually tell the difference. Arguing for truth feels like a calm, open-handed exploration. Arguing for approval feels like a clenched fist struggle, filled with anxiety and a fear of losing. One path leads to growth and peace regardless of the outcome. The other path leads only to a deeper dependence on the unpredictable approval of others, a game you can never truly win. This brings us to a dimension of Stoic thought that elevates the entire practice of discourse from a mere technique to a matter of deep moral character: the profound interconnection between justice and how we argue. For the Stoics, justice wasn't just a societal concept or a legal framework. It was one of the four cardinal virtues, a personal quality to be cultivated in every interaction. It meant giving each person their due, treating them with fundamental fairness and respect, simply by virtue of their shared humanity. And this concept of justice doesn't get checked at the door when a disagreement begins. In fact, the Stoics would argue that how we engage in conflict is one of the truest tests of our commitment to this virtue. The Roman philosopher Seneca, in his writings on ethics and a well-lived life, constantly emphasized this idea of dealing fairly with all people, not just those who agree with us or who hold power over us. He reminds us that every person we interact with deserves a basic level of respect and consideration, a recognition of their inherent dignity. This principle transforms the very nature of an argument. It's no longer a battle against an opponent. It becomes a shared exploration with another human being who, despite holding a different view, is entitled to be heard and treated with fairness. Think about what this looks like in practice. It means consciously granting the other person the space to express their complete thought without interruption, even when every fiber of your being is screaming to jump in and correct them. It means listening to understand the underlying values and experiences that shape their perspective, rather than listening only to find the weak spots in their logic to exploit. It means arguing against the idea, not the person. You can vigorously challenge a point of view without resorting to personal attacks, mockery, or questioning the other person's intelligence or character. This just approach to argumentation requires a tremendous amount of self-discipline. It asks you to hold two seemingly conflicting ideas in your mind at once, a firm conviction in your own position, and a sincere respect for the individual who stands opposed to it. You are not surrendering your truth, you are simply choosing to defend it with tools of reason and respect, rather than with the weapons of aggression and contempt. Consider a modern example that tests this Stoic virtue: a highly charged political debate. The standard playbook, as we see so often, involves talking over the other person, using loaded language to provoke an emotional reaction, twisting their words and attacking their motives rather than their arguments. This is the opposite of just discourse. It is a deliberate attempt to win by any means necessary, even if those means involve being unfair, dishonest, or disrespectful. The Stoic, guided by justice, would take a radically different path. They would ensure the other person is allowed to speak. They would represent the opposing view accurately and charitably before responding to it. They would focus on the substance of the policy disagreement rather than making it about the person advocating for it. This doesn't guarantee you'll change their mind, and it might not even feel as satisfying in the heat of the moment as a sharp, dismissive retort. But it does guarantee something far more important: that you walk away from the exchange with your own integrity intact. You have treated another human being justly, and in doing so, you have honored your own character. The victory is in the virtuous action itself, not in the external outcome. So I want to pose a question for you to sit with, one that gets to the very heart of your own approach to disagreement. How does your personal sense of justice shape the way you argue? When you enter a difficult conversation, are you primarily focused on winning the point by any means available? Or are you equally focused on treating the other person with fundamental fairness throughout the process? Do you see them as an adversary to be defeated, or as a fellow human being who, however mistaken they may be, deserves to be engaged with respectfully? Your answer to this question reveals more about your own character than it does about the merit of your argument. Cultivating this just approach is a daily practice. It's the conscious decision to extend a basic level of respect even to those whose views we find distasteful or wrong. It is the understanding that dehumanizing your opponent is the first step toward injustice, and that true strength lies in being able to disagree passionately without abandoning compassion. In the Stoic view, an argument won through unfair means is no victory at all. It's a failure of virtue, but a discussion conducted with justice and respect, regardless of its conclusion, is always a success. Now, let's talk about a practice that can tie all of these Stoic principles together in the heat of the moment, a kind of superpower for maintaining your composure when a discussion starts to escalate. This is the Stoic art of mindfulness, the disciplined practice of maintaining a sharp, non-judgmental awareness of your present experience. It's about becoming the calm, observant watcher of your own mind and body, especially when conflict is pulling you toward reactive patterns. The great teacher Epictetus gave us the perfect instruction for this. He advised, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, 'Hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent.'" Let me put you to the test. This is the essence of Stoic mindfulness. It's that crucial moment of pause between the external event, the harsh word, the criticism, the frustrating comment, and your internal, often automatic, reaction. It's the mental space where your freedom truly resides. This practice is incredibly practical because it gives you something tangible to focus on, your own physical and mental sensations. Think about the last time you were in a heated argument. Before you even formed a clever retort, your body was already sending you signals. Perhaps your shoulders tensed up toward your ears. Maybe your jaw clenched tight, or you felt a hot flush spread across your chest. Your breath likely became shallow and rapid. These physical cues are not just side effects of the argument. They are your body's early warning system, a built-in alarm telling you that you are becoming emotionally hijacked. In that moment, you have a critical choice. You can ignore these signals, let the reaction steamroll you, and become a passenger in your own outburst. Or you can use them as the cue Epictetus described. You can notice the tension and, in that noticing, create a sliver of space. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're having a tense conversation with your partner. They say something that feels like a personal critique, and you feel that familiar surge of defensiveness. Instead of immediately firing back, you turn your awareness inward for just a split second. You notice the specific physical sensation, the knot in your stomach, the way your fingers are curling into a fist. This simple act of noticing is a revolutionary act of mindfulness. It momentarily separates you from the raw emotion. You are no longer just the anger. You are also the part of you that is observing the anger. This creates just enough distance for your rational mind to re-engage. From this slightly detached vantage point, you can ask the Stoic questions. Is this impression accurate? Is reacting this way going to serve my goal of a peaceful resolution? What is actually within my control right now? This isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about understanding them before you let them dictate your actions. One of the most powerful and immediate tools you can use in this space is your breath. It sounds almost too simple, but the physiological impact is profound. When you feel that argumentative heat rising, make a conscious choice to take one deep, slow breath before you speak. This is not a dramatic, obvious sigh meant to signal your displeasure to the other person. This is a private, internal reset. A deep breath activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming your body down. It literally signals to your physiology that you are not in a life or death situation, slowing your heart rate and reducing the flood of stress hormones that cloud your judgment. That single breath creates the pause that allows for wisdom. It's the difference between snapping, "That's a ridiculous thing to say," and calmly asking, "Can you help me understand what you mean by that?" The first response escalates, the second response opens a door. The words you choose after that mindful breath will be entirely different, and so will the likely outcome of the conversation. This week, I encourage you to practice this. You don't have to wait for a major blow-up. Start by just noticing your body's reactions during minor moments of irritation. When you're stuck in traffic, when a notification interrupts your focus, when a store clerk is moving too slowly. Tune into those physical sensations without judgment. Then practice taking that one deliberate breath. You are building a mental muscle. Then, when you find yourself in a real disagreement, you'll have that tool ready. That moment of mindfulness, of watching your impressions and using your breath, is where you truly reclaim the game. It's the point where you stop being a pawn of your emotions and start being the author of your response. But here's a question that can change everything in the heat of the moment. How much of this will truly matter in a year, or in 5 years, or at the end of your life? The Stoics were masters of this long-term perspective, constantly pulling the camera back from the immediate, heated close up to reveal the vast, quiet landscape of a whole human life. They practiced what we might call temporal humility, the recognition that our present frustrations are almost always magnified by their immediacy, and that time has a way of shrinking even our biggest conflicts down to their proper size. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire filled with endless disputes and political squabbles, constantly reminded himself of this. He would look up at the night sky and reflect on the sheer scale of the cosmos, and then look back at human affairs. He wrote, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are forgotten, the boundless abyss of time past and future, in which all things vanish away." He wasn't being morbid, he was being freeing. He was using the vastness of time and space as a tool to recalibrate his own sense of importance, to see that the urgent argument of today is often the forgotten trifle of tomorrow. This perspective is an incredible antidote to the fever of conflict. Think about your own life. Can you recall an argument from 5 years ago that felt absolutely world-ending in the moment? The sheer passion you poured into it, the nights you lost sleep over it, the conviction that you were right and that this mattered. Now, bring that memory into the present. Can you even remember what it was about without straining? For most of us, the details have faded into a vague blur. The intense emotions have completely evaporated. What remains is not the substance of the disagreement, but perhaps a lesson about ourselves or a faint echo of the feeling it produced. The thing we were so certain would define us, or ruin us, or change everything simply didn't. It became a footnote in the story of our lives, not a chapter title. This is the natural course of almost all our conflicts. They feel monumental because we are standing so close to them, but as we walk through time, they shrink behind us, becoming smaller and smaller on the horizon until they disappear from view entirely. This isn't to say that no argument ever matters. Some do. A heartfelt conversation that deepens a relationship matters. a principled stand against genuine injustice matters. But the Stoic practice is to develop the wisdom to tell the difference. It's to ask ourselves in the moment, is this a hill worth dying on, or is this a minor skirmish over a patch of grass that no one will remember? So much of what we argue about falls into the second category, the political debate at the dinner table that ruins the meal, the spat with a coworker over credit for a minor idea, the heated exchange with a stranger online about a movie review. We invest them with a gravity they simply cannot hold over the long arc of a lifetime. We are essentially mortgaging our present peace for a victory that will be utterly meaningless in the grand scheme of our existence. So what does matter if we zoom out to the scale of a whole life? What are the things that actually endure? They are rarely the points we scored in arguments. They are the quality of our relationships, built on a foundation of forgiven slights and chosen harmony. They are the integrity of our character, demonstrated not when we crushed an opponent, but when we chose kindness over being right. They are the inner peace we cultivated by refusing to be rattled by every minor provocation. They are the love we gave and received, which is almost always incompatible with the need to win. When you look back from the end of your life, you will not wish you had won more arguments. You will wish you had more peace, more connection, more laughter, more moments where you chose to let things go for the sake of something greater. The Stoic long-term view is an invitation to start making those choices now, to live your life as if you are already looking back on it, prioritizing what will truly last and letting the daily noise fade into the silence it deserves. This ability to see our daily disputes in the grand scheme of things is a powerful tool for maintaining peace. But what about when the conflict is directed squarely at us? What happens when we are not just disagreeing with an idea, but are on the receiving end of personal criticism? This is one of the most common and potent triggers for our defensiveness, and Stoicism offers a remarkably effective framework for developing genuine resilience against it. The philosophy teaches us to receive criticism, both the constructive and the harsh, not as a personal attack to be fended off, but as a piece of information to be coolly and rationally evaluated. The goal is to strip the criticism of its emotional sting by subjecting it to a simple two-part test. Epictetus, whose teachings were all about maintaining inner freedom regardless of external circumstances, laid out this test with perfect clarity. He advised, if someone tells you that such a person speaks ill of you, don't make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he does not know my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these. This is not false humility, it's a brilliant cognitive exercise. The first part of his advice points us to the source of the criticism. The second part points us to its truth. Let's break down that first part, considering the source. When criticism lands, our initial, raw reaction is often pure emotion, hurt, anger, indignation. The Stoic intervention is to pause that reaction and ask a deliberate question: who is delivering this feedback? What is their character? What is their intention? Are they a person of wisdom and goodwill, offering a perspective meant to help you grow? Or are they speaking from a place of their own insecurity, jealousy, or pain? This isn't about dismissing the critic out of hand, but about properly contextualizing their words. If your most respected mentor points out a flaw in your project, that feedback carries immense weight because of the source's credibility and caring intent. Their criticism is a gift, an external set of eyes helping you see a blind spot. Conversely, if a known gossip or a competitive rival makes the same criticism, the content of the words might be identical, but their value is vastly diminished because the source lacks integrity. The words themselves are neutral. It is the character and intent of the speaker, Chinese letter them meaning and weight. By training ourselves to look first at the source, we instantly drain much of the negative emotion from the situation. We are no longer reacting to the words themselves, but to a more complete and rational assessment of the entire event. The second part of the test, and arguably the more important one, is to consider the truth of the criticism. After you have assessed the source, you turn your focus inward and ask with brutal honesty, is there validity to this? Is there a kernel of truth here, however poorly it was delivered? This requires immense courage and self-awareness. Our ego's default setting is to reject any negative feedback outright to protect our self-image. The Stoic, however, is committed to the pursuit of truth above the comfort of ego. Even if the criticism comes from a flawed source delivered with malicious intent, if it contains a speck of truth, it is valuable to you. That speck of truth is now yours to work with, a free pointer toward a personal blind spot you can now address. Epictetus's quip about "my other faults" is a humorous way of acknowledging that we all have flaws. If a critic only points out one, they are actually being gentle. By accepting this, we completely disarm the critic. They cannot hurt us by revealing what we already freely acknowledge about ourselves. Our growth becomes the focus, not our defense. Imagine applying this at work. Your manager calls you into their office after a presentation and says, "Your analysis was thorough, but your delivery was rushed and hard to follow." It undermined the impact of your good work. The defensive, ego-driven response is immediate internal panic. You might think, "They just don't appreciate my style," or "they're being overly critical." Or you might start mentally listing all the times you've presented well to defend yourself. You leave the meeting feeling resentful and demoralized. Now apply the Stoic test. First, consider the source, your manager. They are invested in your success. They have seen many presentations, and their intention is likely to help you improve, not to tear you down. This context alone softens the blow. Then, search for the truth. You think back to the presentation. Your heart was pounding. You did speak faster than you meant to because you were nervous. The feedback, therefore, isn't an attack on your character. It's an accurate observation about a specific, improvable skill. Your response can now shift from defensiveness to curiosity. "Thank you for that feedback. I did feel I was rushing. What specifically about the delivery was hardest to follow? I'd like to work on that for next time." This response transforms a potentially awkward criticism into a collaborative plan for growth. You haven't taken it personally because you didn't make it about your entire self-worth. You made it about a single, addressable behavior. This resilience is not about developing a thick skin in the sense of becoming numb or callous. It's about developing a discerning mind. It's the ability to let the useless, malicious criticism fall away like water off a duck's back, while absorbing the useful, truthful criticism like a plant absorbing nutrients. It is the ultimate expression of the dichotomy of control. You cannot control what others say about you, but you have absolute control over how you process it, what meaning you assign to it, and what you choose to do with it. So I want to ask you to turn the lens on yourself for a moment. How do you typically handle criticism right now? Is your first instinct to explain it away, to get defensive, to list the reasons why the critic is wrong? Or are you able to create that moment of pause, to separate the message from the messenger, and to go on a personal treasure hunt for any hidden piece of truth that could make you better? Your answer to that question determines whether criticism remains a source of chronic distress or becomes one of your most powerful tools for lifelong growth. This brings us to a virtue that acts as the essential bridge between understanding and action, the quiet force that allows all the other Stoic principles to take root, the profound practice of patience. In our modern world of instant gratification and rapid-fire digital debates, patience can feel like a forgotten art, a sign of weakness or indecision. But the Stoics saw it with utterly different eyes. For them, patience was not passive waiting. It was an active, powerful virtue, a disciplined choice to allow the slow, organic work of reason and understanding to unfold, rather than trying to force a resolution through sheer will or volume. It is the wisdom to recognize that some truths cannot be rushed, and that people, including ourselves, often need time and space to process, reflect, and genuinely integrate new perspectives. The Roman philosopher Seneca, in his letters, frequently touched on this slow, deliberate pace of true understanding. He observed that reason works not like a lightning bolt, but like a steady, gentle rain that soaks deeply into the soil. Forcing it, he would argue, is like trying to rush the growth of a tree by pulling on its branches. You might create the appearance of progress, but you are actually damaging the roots and ensuring it will never stand strong on its own. Think about how this contrasts with our typical approach to arguments. Our impulse is often to press our advantage, to keep talking, to pile on more evidence and more logic the moment we sense the other person hesitating or resisting. We operate under the illusion that if we can just explain ourselves one more time, a little louder or a little more forcefully, the breakthrough will happen. But this is like shouting at a seed to make it grow. It doesn't work. In fact, it often has the opposite effect, causing the other person to shut down completely as they feel overwhelmed and cornered. The Stoic virtue of patience asks us to do the counterintuitive thing, to stop talking, to consciously create a pause, to allow for silence. This silence is not empty, it is fertile ground. It is the space where the other person can actually hear their own thoughts, where they can turn your points over in their mind without the pressure of having to respond immediately to your expectant gaze. It is an act of profound respect for their internal process. Consider a practical example many of us have faced. You're trying to help a teenager understand the importance of a particular life decision, perhaps about their education or their friends. You've had a long, circular discussion that's going nowhere, ending in frustration on both sides. The impatient approach is to follow them to their room, to keep the pressure on, to demand they see things your way now. The Stoic approach, guided by patience, would be to disengage, to say your piece clearly and calmly, and then to give them space. You might say, "I've shared my concerns. I trust you to think about it. Let's talk more tomorrow." Then you walk away. This is incredibly difficult because it requires you to release control of the timeline. But in that space you provide, something magical can happen. Without you there as an opponent to argue against, their defensive walls often come down. They are left alone with the ideas themselves, and they can begin to evaluate them on their own terms. The next day, they might approach you with a new perspective, or a genuine question, showing that the seeds of reason you planted have begun to quietly sprout on their own. The resolution you forced could never have achieved this depth. This practice of patience is intimately tied to the Stoic focus on what is within our control. You cannot control the speed at which someone else understands or accepts something. That process is internal to them and is firmly outside your sphere of influence. What you can control is your own choice to provide the conditions where understanding is most likely to flourish: clarity, respect, and the gift of time. Impatience, then, is ultimately a form of frustration directed at the uncontrollable. It is the storm of emotion that arises when the external world refuses to move at the pace your ego demands. Cultivating patience is the practice of calming that storm, of aligning your expectations with reality, and finding peace in the act of sowing seeds rather than constantly digging them up to check for growth. So the next time you feel that familiar heat of impatience rising in a discussion, that urge to interrupt, to have the last word, to force the issue, see if you can recognize it for what it is: a temptation to abandon virtue for the illusion of control. Take a slow breath and make the conscious choice to practice this stoic strength. Offer the conversation and the person you're speaking with the generous space of a pause. You may just find that what grows in that silence is far more valuable than anything you could have ever demanded. But what if there was a way to transform these frustrating exchanges into something entirely different? What if we could shift the entire energy from confrontation to collaboration? This is the profound shift from argument to dialogue, a move the Stoics would see not as a compromise, but as a strategic and virtuous upgrade in how we communicate. An argument by its very nature is combative. It's structured as a battle with winners and losers where the goal is to defeat the other person's position. Dialogue, in stark contrast, is collaborative. It's structured as a shared investigation where the goal is to explore a problem together in the hope of finding a deeper understanding or a common truth. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who constantly had to navigate complex political negotiations and personal disputes, pointed directly toward this collaborative ideal. He reminded himself to approach others not as adversaries but as fellow beings with whom he shared a common purpose. He wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." This simple analogy reframes everything. In an argument, we operate as solitary insects, stinging each other for individual dominance. In a dialogue, we operate as parts of a larger whole, recognizing that a pointless, damaging conflict benefits no one, not even the apparent victor. Our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the health of our shared connections. This shift in goal is everything. In an argument, your internal compass is set to winning. Your focus is narrowed to spotting flaws, crafting counterattacks, and marshalling evidence that supports your pre-existing conclusion. You are essentially performing a soliloquy with an opponent. In a dialogue, you reset that compass to understanding. Your focus expands to include active listening, asking genuine questions, and sincerely trying to see the world through the other person's eyes. You are no longer a performer, you are an explorer, and you've invited someone else to join the expedition. The difference in energy is palpable. An argument feels tight, defensive, and draining. A dialogue, even when the topic is difficult, can feel open, curious, and surprisingly energizing because you are no longer carrying the immense weight of needing to control the outcome all by yourself. Consider a classic source of tension in many relationships: finances. The argument approach might sound like this. One partner says, "We never have enough money because you're always spending on things we don't need." The other partner retorts, "Well, maybe if you made more money, we wouldn't have to worry about it so much." This is a classic battle. Both people are on the attack, defending their own position and blaming the other. The conversation will inevitably spiral into a painful rehashing of past failures and personal criticisms. Nothing gets solved, and both people leave feeling attacked and misunderstood. Now imagine the same couple shifting to a dialogue. It might begin with one partner saying, "I've been feeling really anxious about our finances lately, and I'd like us to figure it out together. Can we look at the budget and both share what feels most important for us to spend on?" This opening is not an accusation, it's an invitation. It frames the problem as a shared challenge to be solved collaboratively. Us versus the problem, rather than me versus you. The conversation that follows is likely to be calmer, more factual, and more productive. You might still disagree on specific priorities, but you're disagreeing within the context of a shared goal: financial security and harmony for the household. That shared goal becomes the common ground that makes compromise possible and even desirable. This week, I want to offer you a practical challenge, a real-world experiment in Stoic communication. Think of a recurring, low-stakes disagreement you tend to have with someone in your life. Maybe it's with your roommate about washing the dishes, or with a colleague about the best way to manage a shared inbox. The next time you feel that familiar debate starting, see if you can consciously pivot. Instead of leaning in to prove your point, try to turn it into a dialogue. You can use a simple phrase to signal the shift, something like, "You know, we often see this differently. Help me understand your perspective on it first." Then, the most important part, truly listen to their answer without planning your rebuttal. Listen for the underlying concern or value driving their position. Are they seeking efficiency, peace of mind, a sense of fairness? See if you can identify that shared value and then frame your own perspective within it. I see that we both want the kitchen to be a pleasant space. For me, that comes from having it clean before I go to bed. What would that look like for you? This isn't a magic trick that will instantly resolve every conflict, but it is a profound change in strategy. You are no longer trying to win a battle, you are trying to build a bridge. And in the Stoic view, the strength and peace you gain from building that bridge is a far greater victory than any you could ever claim by simply proving you were right. Yet so many of us feel a powerful, almost magnetic pull toward that final retort, that parting shot we hope will echo in the other person's mind and finally seal our victory. We lie awake at night rehearsing what we should have said, or we hit send on that one last text, desperately trying to control the narrative and have the definitive conclusion. But the Stoics ask us to examine this compulsion with clear eyes. What are we truly seeking in that moment? It's rarely about truth. It's almost always about ego. It's the desire to feel that we ended the exchange on our terms, that we had the power to deliver the final judgment. We are seeking a sense of control, but it's an illusion. In reality, the person who needs the last word has already handed control of their emotional state over to their opponent. Their peace of mind is now contingent on getting that person to read, to hear, to acknowledge their final point. They have made themselves a prisoner of someone else's reaction. Epictetus, who spoke so powerfully about the inner citadel of our mind, cuts to the heart of this. He reminds us, if a person gave your body to any stranger he met on his way, you would certainly be angry. And do you feel no shame in handing over your own mind to be confused and mystified by anyone who happens to verbally attack you? When you feel that compulsive urge to have the final say, you are essentially handing your mind, your thoughts, your calm, your focus over to the person you're arguing with. You are allowing them to occupy valuable mental real estate long after the conversation is over. The true freedom Epictetus describes comes from reclaiming that territory. It's the liberating realization that you do not need their concession to be at peace. Your worth and your clarity are not dependent on their acknowledgement. You can simply stop. You can let the conversation end, even if it feels unfinished to your ego, and in doing so, you declare your independence from their opinion. Imagine a classic circular debate, perhaps with a coworker about a process that isn't going to change. You've both made your points, you've both repeated yourselves. The conversation is going in exhausting circles, generating heat but no light. The standard pattern is to keep talking, getting louder and more frustrated, until one of you storms off or the clock saves you. Now imagine a different choice. You take a quiet breath and you consciously decide to break the cycle. You say, "It's clear we see this differently. I appreciate your perspective." And then you stop. You don't add a final jab. You don't reiterate your main point. You just let it be. In that moment, you might feel a strange sense of unease, the ego's protest at being reined in. But very quickly, that feeling is replaced by something far more powerful, a profound sense of empowerment. You didn't lose, you chose. You chose to value your peace over a pointless performance. You walked away not in defeat, but in victory, the only victory that ever truly matters in Stoicism, which is victory over your own compulsive need to win. This isn't about suppressing your voice or avoiding standing your ground on important issues. It's about developing the wisdom to discern between a battle that serves a purpose and one that only serves your pride. It's about recognizing that the compulsion to have the last word is almost always a sign that the latter is at play. So I want to leave you with a question to sit with, a litmus test for your own motivations. The next time you're in a disagreement and you feel that powerful urge to fire off that final message, to get in that one last point, pause and ask yourself, am I doing this to contribute something true and meaningful? Or am I doing this because I cannot bear the thought of not being the one who speaks last? Your honest answer will tell you everything you need to know about who is truly in control of your mind in that moment. So how do we take all of this profound philosophy and actually put it to work in the heat of the moment, when our heart is pounding and our ego is screaming to be heard? It starts by building a simple, personal toolkit, a set of mental reminders you can reach for when you feel a disagreement starting to escalate. Think of it as a stoic emergency protocol, designed to keep you anchored in your principles rather than swept away by the current of conflict. The first and most critical tool is also the simplest, the intentional pause. Before a single word leaves your lips, take one deep, conscious breath. This isn't just a cliché, it's a physiological intervention. That breath creates a sliver of space between the external trigger and your internal reaction, a space where your reason can reassert itself. In that pause, you are exercising the very essence of Stoic power, the power to choose your response. It's in that quiet moment you can ask yourself the fundamental question Epictetus would have us remember: is this within my control? This immediately leads to the second step, consciously sorting the entire situation into the Stoic dichotomy of control. Mentally draw that line. On one side, place what is truly yours to manage: your tone, your word choice, your intention, your willingness to listen, and your commitment to staying respectful. On the other side, place everything else: the other person's opinions, their emotional state, their agreement, and the final outcome of the discussion. Your energy, your focus, your effort, these precious resources should be poured entirely into the first category. The moment you feel yourself straining to control something on the other side of that line, you know you've been hooked by the illusion of victory. You are trying to change the weather instead of simply choosing the right coat to wear. This mental sorting is a habit, and like any habit, it requires practice. But each time you do it, you strengthen your ability to engage from a place of strength rather than desperation. With your own stance secured, the next practice is to shift your entire mode of listening. Make it your goal to understand their viewpoint so completely that you could articulate it back to them in a way they would agree with. This is not strategic listening for weak points. This is empathetic listening for comprehension. As Seneca encouraged, grant them the right to speak their full truth. Suspend the internal monologue that's crafting your rebuttal. Instead, listen for the underlying values, fears, or experiences that are informing their position. Often, you'll find the real disagreement isn't about the surface-level topic, but about a deeper priority. They might be arguing for speed because they value efficiency, while you're arguing for thoroughness because you value security. When you can identify that shared value, it seems like we both want this project to be successful. We just see different paths to get there. You instantly transform an argument into a collaborative problem-solving session. Finally, anchor the entire interaction with a redefined goal. Your aim is not to emerge victorious, but to emerge with your integrity and equanimity intact. You are there to express your truth clearly and respectfully, not to force-feed it to someone else. As Marcus Aurelius reflected, the real victory is self-mastery. Imagine walking into a discussion with this as your sole objective. The pressure to convince, to win, to be validated simply evaporates. You can engage with a lightness and clarity that is both more effective and far less draining. You are playing a different game entirely, one where you win by how you play, not by the final score. To make this practical, why not create a personal Stoic argument checklist? It doesn't need to be complicated, just a few bullet points on a note in your phone or a piece of paper on your desk. Something like 1. Pause and breathe. 2. What can I control here? 3. Listen to understand, not to rebut. 4. My goal is my integrity, not their agreement. Review this checklist before you enter a known difficult conversation, or bring it to mind when you feel a spontaneous argument flaring up. This week, I challenge you to pick just one of these steps to practice. Maybe it's the breath. Maybe it's consciously releasing the need to control the outcome. Don't try to overhaul every conversation at once. Just focus on that single, small victory over your own automatic reactions. Notice what happens. You might just find that the argument loses its power over you, and you discover a new kind of win, one that leaves you feeling calm, clear, and truly undefeated. So as we bring our exploration to a close, let's return to that initial feeling, the hollow victory, the lingering frustration after a disagreement you were sure you had won. What Stoicism offers us is a profound and lasting reframe of that entire experience. It asks us to shift the battlefield from the external world of clashing opinions to the internal world of our own judgments and reactions. True winning is redefined not as conquering someone else, but as conquering our own ego, our own anger, and our own desperate need for control. It is the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you maintained your integrity, your reason, and your humanity, even when provoked. That is a victory that can never be taken from you because it resides entirely within your own character. Every argument, then, from the most trivial spat to the most heated debate, ceases to be a threat to our peace and becomes something far more valuable, an opportunity. It is a training ground, a gym for the soul where we can practice the core Stoic virtues in real time. It's a chance to exercise patience by allowing someone else to speak fully without interruption. It's a chance to cultivate empathy by sincerely trying to see the world through their eyes, even if we never come to share their view. It is a chance to demonstrate self-control by choosing a calm response over a reactive outburst. When we see these encounters as practice sessions for virtue, we stop fearing them and start appreciating them for the growth they make possible. We stop asking, "Did I win?" and start asking, "Did I act with wisdom and character?" Marcus Aurelius, in his private meditations, beautifully captured this ultimate goal, writing, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Your tranquility is not found by controlling the chaos of the outside world, but by diligently guarding the peace within your own mind. Each time you choose a deep breath over a sharp retort, each time you listen to understand rather than to rebut, each time you grant someone the freedom to be wrong, you are adding another layer of color to your soul, a layer of profound and lasting equanimity. You are building an inner citadel that no external argument can ever breach. So I want to leave you with one final question to carry into your day, a question that can fundamentally change your next encounter before it even begins. How might your next argument change if you focused only on what you can control? If your entire goal shifted from changing someone else's mind to mastering your own reactions, imagine walking into that discussion with that single intention. The pressure evaporates, the need to have the last word disappears. All that remains is the clarity of your own principles and the respect you choose to extend, regardless of what comes back your way. That is the real game, and it's one you can start winning today. If you found this reframe helpful and you'd like to explore more practical wisdom from Stoicism for modern life, consider subscribing to the channel. We delve into these ancient ideas to help you build a more resilient, peaceful, and purposeful life. Thank you for watching.